Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Policki, and Jacob Liberta is back with us here, and we're going to be talking some Minnesota Wild today. So if you're a Minnesota Wild fan, please hit that like button and the subscribe button on this channel as well. Alberta, Minnesota Wild continue to be hot. They had that small little trip up against the Penguins in overtime to finish out their homestand. But ever since then, beating Carolina on the road, super impressive win, beating Washington and really dominating Washington on the road. Another super impressive win. So, I mean, this team is 9-0-1 in their last 10 games. They're just absolutely destroying their competition. What's been your thoughts on the Wild here and just how they're looking basically since the trade deadline?
Yeah, they're looking great. They took advantage of all those home games like we would have hoped, and even taking an extra step further and doing all this, making all these, putting together all these good performances on the East Coast. Playing, for instance, the likes Pittsburgh. I know we lost that one, but took it to overtime. And then you had the Capitals game. We certainly cleaned up in. And then you got the performance against the Hurricanes. Now we beat them twice this year, and they're the top team in that division, I believe, as we're recording this right now. So I couldn't be more thrilled, I guess. It's the list is getting shorter and shorter as far as teams I really wouldn't want to see in the playoffs at this point. Like you were saying last night to me, I think there's nobody the Wild can't take on besides right now. I'd feel a little bit wary about the Florida Panthers if it got that far to like the Cup, or Colorado. I think that's still a big one. But otherwise, it feels like the Wild could play with anybody, especially right now. I feel like we could play in a series with even a team like Colorado in the second round potentially.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is the way that the standings are shaking up here because St. Louis is in third behind us. We've kind of gained some separation there. We're up 5 points as we record this on Monday afternoon, but Monday night here they play Arizona Coyotes. So, I mean, that's probably going to be a win for the Blues unless, something goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
But we're also 9 points ahead of Nashville as it stands right now. So we've really pulled away from that wild card race, which is good. But obviously huge games coming up this week against the Preds and the Blues, both on the road. So the Wild will have to take care of business against those teams. And, I don't expect them to win both games, but as long as you win one of them and, hopefully the Blues game, or it really doesn't matter. I guess you could keep pushing Nashville down too. But, yeah, it's crazy, man. And then the way the wild card's shaping up too, you got Nashville's in there right now because they're outside the top 3 in our division. And then you got Vegas is also that second wild card. So in the first round right now, if the playoffs started today, you'd have Vegas playing Colorado, which you could sign me up for that because I think Vegas could hang with Colorado. They're a proven, experienced playoff team. They've been there before. They've been to a couple Stanley Cups. So I'm bullish. Vegas has not had a very good year, but they're on a 5-game winning streak right now. I think they're slowly starting to figure it out. But what I also noticed is Dallas is only a point behind them and has 3 games in hand. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it I think Winnipeg might be a little too far back to really make a push for a wild card spot. So I think between Nashville, Dallas, and the Vegas Golden Knights, it's probably between those 3 teams for those 2 wild card spots.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I know you already alluded to this, but Vegas playing Colorado in the first round would definitely be interesting just because, it was just last year that Vegas won that series against Colorado after going down 2-0. I remember watching that game 3. Colorado had a lead in that game late and then ended up squandering it away, and then the rest is history because Vegas ran away with the rest of the series, and that's kind of been the story for Colorado really over the past number of years, ever since they won their last Stanley Cup back. I think it was late 90s, early 2000s or something. Yeah. Every time they get these big spots in the playoffs, they don't win. So really, I think that's could be all you can hope for really as a Wild team, hoping to avoid Colorado if you can. And really, when you could think about those 3 teams that could potentially play them, Vegas is probably the one that would give them the most fits. So that's probably what you'd hope for. But again, this all banks on the fact like this only matters if the Wild can get past Nashville or St. Louis. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we play right now as the team's currently constructed with a huge guy like Fleury in the mix now, and see how we play against Nashville and St. Louis these days.
Yeah, that's a very important point because we have not looked good against either of those teams this season.
No.
I was worried about Colorado, but we ended up beating them in overtime. Talbot's been playing amazing. Fleury's been playing amazing. I think I saw Fleury's got like a .958 save percentage since he's been here, just absolutely outrageous. But
yes,
just if you can just basically prove that you can hang with these teams, obviously a win if it's a close game, you might lose. It's whatever. But if you just hang with these teams, you don't get smoked like Nashville smoked us the last time we played, or St. Louis kind of smoked us in that Winter Classic. If you can just hang with these teams, prove that you can, you're right there with them. Because I think the Wild do have more talent than both these teams. I don't think it's even questionable. It's just whether or not we actually can beat them in a series. And, historically, we've always struggled with the Blues, and Nashville's kind of shown to be an aggressive team this year. And I really thought Nashville was going to fall off at some point here, but they've just they've kept with it, and they're still hanging in there. I mean, they've fallen back a little bit from where the Wild are and even the Blues, but they're hanging tough in that wild card spot. It certainly looks like they're going to be a playoff team at this point.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I think even though we are the better team, like you said, the more talent, it's just the better team doesn't always win in these playoff games. So kind of just depends on how everybody's feeling going into the playoffs, who's hot, who's not. And I think these games this week could really be an indicator as far as where we stand in terms of just straight up matching up and being able, like you said, to play competitively and hopefully win these games and feel good about it. So I think that's the biggest thing, because everything else really going on around us is just extra noise, I'd say, at this point, because all we're doing is locking up second in the division, and whatever anybody else does in the league doesn't really matter. It just comes down to how we do in comparison to St. Louis and Nashville.
Yeah, it's really too bad we went on that little slump recently, because honestly, with how hot we've been lately, if we would have won a few more of those games, the division wouldn't be totally out of question yet, I don't think. But there's still like a 13-point gap there. There's no way that's going to happen. So
that's a lot to make up against a team that wins as much as Colorado does.
Exactly. So basically what I'm hoping for is Colorado just gets a tough draw in that first round against like a Vegas that's, proven that they can beat Colorado in the playoffs, and go from there. Before we kind of wrap up here, let's talk about Kirill Kaprizov, because over this time, he broke the Minnesota Wild single-season points record that was held by Marian Gaborik. He's only a few goals back of breaking the record that Stahl and Gaborik both have 42 goals as the record. So he's on track to beat that record as well. I think he'll score at least 3 more goals before the season's over. Yeah. So, I mean, can you really put into words like how incredible this guy is in terms of just easily being the best player in franchise history? And he's only 24 years old. Like, yet you feel like he's going to get even better,
Yeah, I think right now it's a pretty hard time to take a step back and really look at the franchise history as a whole and be like, Kaprizov's the best player we ever had. Because on the one hand, I think there's easily a case to be made there. He probably is. But at the same time, when he's only been here a little over a calendar year or something like that playing for the team, it's like, this seems like we're jumping the gun a bit, but it's like when you send these franchise records and you just watch them every night, it just feels like it. And this whole Wild team goes with him. So I'd say, I mean, no player that I can remember in Wild history has ever had this much control or this much success, especially early on in a career, to the point where it's like you feel like we're a true cup contender, I guess, because all these other great players that had franchise history, it's like, what do they really do in the playoffs, or what they do as far as like pushing this team towards getting close to a championship? Like, that never happened. So obviously it still remains to be seen with Kaprizov too. Like, we haven't won any playoff series with him either yet, but again, this is the second season, and he's really had so much success that it's just hard to deny and say that he's not the greatest player in the franchise's history. So at this point, it's obviously a great trajectory, and I think he is. But it's just I gotta pause just a little bit, just because I know it's just literally season 2. But I feel pretty good about him, obviously. But how about you?
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, it's only the second season. Like, a lot of people could say, well, how could you say that already? But like you said, a lot of it's the eye test, just watching him every night. It's just different than anything you've ever seen before, and in a good way. The records are going to be there, and like you said, it's going to determine, playoff success too. Like, that'll be a big part of it. But that's all stuff we can look forward to as well, because the Wild have a good team this year. Hopefully they can make some noise. And you never know, if a team like Colorado gets bounced before we have to play them, even then, like, I think we can hang in a series with Colorado. I'm not saying we're going to beat them. I'm not saying it's going to go 7, but we're not going to go in and get swept by Colorado in a series,
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If we can get past St. Louis or Nashville, I definitely could see us at least make it in this series.
Yeah. So, Bill Guerin absolutely pushed all the right buttons at the trade deadline. I mean, 9-0-1 basically since the trade deadline. That was 10 games ago. So, just a phenomenal job. And yeah, I couldn't be more proud of the way this thing has gone. Honestly, it's just they re-injected some new life into them. Delorier's been fantastic as like a fourth line fighter, grinder type dude. Middleton's, I think, been a pretty steady defenseman. Just a bigger body back there has been super nice. Tyson Jost is really, I mean, now that Matt Boldy's been out a couple games, he's filled in admirably with that Fiala line. And then obviously Marc-Andre Fleury, man. I mean, the dude's been fantastic since he's been here. So Bill Guerin knows exactly what he's doing. And it's kind of fun to have a team where you trust every move they make. You love all the players. You love the coach. It's like, I really can't like nitpick anything when it comes to this team right now, other than, they're not Colorado Avalanche up over 100 points already.
Yeah, exactly. And I think these last few weeks of games have really been a reassurance, I guess, that this real team, like the team we are most of the time, is the team that showed up at the beginning of the season too, and now these last few weeks. And because, I mean, it was starting to be called into question basically at the end of February and beginning of March how bad we were really. And you kind of wondered, like, was that just a fluke early on? Everybody coming together and winning all these games from really unlikely performers, everybody having all these career seasons and stuff. And like early on when Foligno and Hartman were scoring basically every night, and it's like, is this sustainable? Like, is this the real team? But I think we've come back around to it again now, and you really feel like we're a true contender to win the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think after last night, Foligno got his 20th goal, and Eriksson crossed that threshold as well. So we're the third team in the NHL with 6 guys over 20 goals.
Yeah.
I think that joins Florida and the Blues, if I'm not mistaken. But So, I mean, crazy stuff. Just, it's kind of a record-setting year. It kind of reminds me of the Twins Bomba Squad year, where you're just getting all these, career best seasons from all these players, and your team is good. But that year, the Twins did not trade for pieces at the trade deadline to help them. So maybe that's the missing piece for this Wild team, and maybe that's what they went out and acquired, and they can maybe make a playoff run here. But any other final thoughts from you before we take off here?
Yeah, definitely pay close attention to the games against St. Louis and Nashville if you can, just because I think those are the most important that we have left on the schedule this year, or really this month, because this is it. But before we get into the playoffs, because if we look good now and win convincingly, then I'll feel really good about our chances, not only to get past the first round, but potentially just going all the way, at least making it to the Cup, if not winning the Cup, because I know the Eastern Conference is pretty deep at the top there, because there's a good handful of teams I think all have more points than the Wild out there. So I'd say we'll go from there, start with Nashville and St. Louis, and then hopefully we'll have bigger fish to fry later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more, man. It's just so nice. So nice to see this team doing well, and hopefully they can keep it up and close out strong and go into the playoffs as one of the hottest teams in the league, because we know how important that is too. So
yes, exactly.
It'll be a nice sprint to the finish here for the Wild. But that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Like I mentioned earlier, please hit the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram, and leave your comments below. What are your thoughts on the Wild's hot streak here? How far do you think they can push this thing going into the playoffs? And maybe what's your ideal matchup? Who do you want to face in the first round? And who do you want to see Colorado face in the first round? So let us know your comments below. And until next time, thanks for watching.